the Commanders in 2023, well, some people thought that this was for real, but most of them thought that this is not a real undefeated start. So Washington started off 2-0, but they really weren't going anywhere after that, because prior to that season, there was significant change abound, because out goes former owner Dan Snyder. He sells the team to Philadelphia 76ers owner Josh Harris, and he comes in with an ownership group to buy the team. And you damn know well that's finally, in the eyes of Commanders fans and pretty much around the NFL, that real change was coming to the nation's capital. And I don't mean like change like, oh, they're just gonna like brush it off like that. No, real change was coming. So this past 2023 for them, it pretty much went as expected for them. Their major deficiencies eventually began to show across the board, especially at offensive line and unfortunately quarterback, because Sam Howell wasn't as bad as people said he was, because sure, he made a lot of mistakes. He crumbled under the pressure of the talent deficiency around him. But when you look at the talent deficit, it was pretty bad. But again, not all Sam Howell's fault. Regardless, the rebuild was pretty much underway as expected in DC, as the Commanders limped their way to a 4-13 finish, but it was for the best. So this past offseason, the change was really underway. They replaced Martin Mayhew, starting with him. They replaced him with 49ers assistant general manager Adam Peters as their new general manager. Adam Peters, coming from the 49ers, the assistant to John Lynch. So he brings in some experience of trying to build a winning team. So at least the Commanders are starting good there. Now they comes to the head coach. They replaced Ron Rivera with former Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn as their head coach. So Dan Quinn, it's been a little while since he was an actual head coach. The last time we saw him in that position was during his time with the Atlanta Falcons, and well, we know how that went in after Super Bowl 51. But that was quite a while ago. So during his time in Dallas, obviously we know how he was with that strong Cowboys defense, but unfortunately, the last mark with that Cowboys defense didn't go so well. Nonetheless, it'll be interesting how that works out for him. And he brought some notable names to his coaching staff, like former Cardinals head coach Cliff Kingsbury as its offensive coordinator. And coming with him from Dallas was his secondary coach, Joe Witt, as his defensive coordinator. So again, interesting how that will play out. And then he knew that real change was coming when they were finally going to get their own quarterback, as Sam Howell was traded away to the Seahawks in return for third and fourth round picks from this year's draft. So real change, significant change was coming for the Washington Commanders and their fans this year, as like I said, the rebuild was well underway for this group, and that continued into free agency. They added a lot of players, and they let some names go, but not too much of notice. Like Curtis Samuel, he goes on to the Bills. Kendall Fuller, he goes on to the Patriots, but that might be a little bit of a loss of sus there. Probably a little bit of a big hit to the Commander secondary was Cameron Curl. He had a pretty good season for them, despite everything that went on in 2023. He might be a kind of big loss for them. Hopefully, the Commanders replaced him. So looking at some of their big name additions this past offseason, that goes in the pass rush, trying to replace Montez Sweat as well as Chase Young. They let him go too to the 49ers via trade. So they tried to replace both of them with Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler. At least for Dorrance Armstrong, he was a key contributor in the Cowboys defensive line when Dan Quinn was there. And then going on the other side of the trenches, they got a key piece to their horrific offensive line and trying to improve that. Tyler Blazdas from the Cowboys as well. So beefing up that interior was a big must for Washington, as I noted in my team needs in their recap this past March. Some other notable additions for them was getting guard Nick Allegretti from the Kansas City Chiefs. So a kind of proven guard from a Super Bowl winning team coming over. Also, you get running back Austin Eckler from the Chargers, and also linebacker Bobby Wagner from the Seahawks. But just like with other teams that I noted on here, the draft is where the Commanders really did their damage in terms of trying to improve their roster. And that started with the second overall pick, getting the quarterback that they wanted, and that was by the name of Jaden Daniels from LSU. Now, from the small snippets that I've seen of this guy, he looks pretty good. And I say that with a lot of players, but he seems like out of the entire quarterbacks in this class, he seems like he has the most upside, most with his multi-play ability, scrambling out of the pocket pretty well, and getting that ball out really quick. So it'll be interesting to see how he translates that into the NFL. He apparently he completes a lot of his passes very good. It's like a good percentage ratio. It's a pretty good percentage when it comes to TDs, interceptions. Of course, I'm not a stats guy, but again, he performs pretty well during his college days. So other notable additions that the Commanders made in the draft was mainly on the defensive side, like Jerzon Noon from Illinois, and then corner Mike Zandstriel from Michigan, and then getting a little bit of help for Jaden Daniels as well. Was receiver Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's brother from Rice. So when you look at the Commanders' offseason, I mean, it's clear that their rebuild can now get fully underway. They now have their head coach. They now have a GM that clearly has committed to, getting his guys, his coach, his quarterback. Now fans can see what year one is going to look like under the new look Washington Commanders. Speaking of that offensive line, probably looking at the team itself, the offensive line should be a lot better, because that was a major priority I was hoping that they would address this past offseason, especially the interior blocking, because Sam Howell took a shit ton of hits, like the most in the NFL. I think he broke a record for like most sacks this past year or last year. So the Commanders were like, no, we're not going to do that to whoever's going to be our quarterback next. So they went out and actually upgraded the offensive line, especially in the interior. By one question mark is the exterior. Sure, they have right tackle Andrew Wiley, who was okay last year, but now they have to address the other side, the left tackle spot, because obviously you don't want to have like major flaws on either side or either spot in the offensive line, because protecting Jaden Daniels is gonna be your priority. Like, protecting him is gonna be a must if you're the Commanders. So obviously going into 2024, you want to have a good rookie year out of your new quarterback, Jaden Daniels. How is he gonna translate into the NFL? I'm not sure what the upside is gonna look like, but it should be fun to watch. So looking at some of their key games going into this season, you start on the road. You play the Tampa Bay Bucks. Should be an exciting matchup between Baker Mayfield and Jaden Daniels. See the two former first overall picks duke it out. And then you come home to play the New York Giants in an NFC East division matchup. And then you go back on the road to play Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. So these are kind of three early first tests for these new look Commanders. So when you look at this team, it's going to be some interesting things to watch. Like I said, Jaden Daniels, how is he going to look in his rookie year? What is he going to look like? Is he going to do good? Is he going to do bad? And then also for Dan Quinn, what is his coaching style going to be like? What new or old is he going to bring to the table? It's been like 5 years since he last was a head coach, and I get it. He did pretty well for himself when he was the Dallas defensive coordinator, but yeah, being a coordinator and a head coach are two different things. So it'll be interesting to see what new things he's bringing to the table since his last time out in Atlanta. So after 2 decades of Dan Snyder's shittiness, it's finally a new era for Washington football. And I don't mean Washington football team, you know that name, Washington football. They utilized nearly every single resource this past offseason to upgrade the most glaring weaknesses from the last 5 years, especially with quarterback. Like that carousel of quarterbacks we've seen, especially in the last several years, it was seriously bad. Like after Kirk Cousins left. But now you get a foundational quarterback with Jayden Daniels, and you still have a pretty good supporting cast around him. Now, they still have a couple of holes to sort out, and we have to see what Daniels will really look like. But if things play right for them, Washington can take its first step in commanding some winning ways this coming season.